Welcome to the deep dive, where we really try to unpack the complexities of the digital world, give you the essential insights you need. Today, we're diving into something you hear everywhere, right? Boardrooms, coffee shops, the cloud. But what is the cloud, really? I mean, beyond just this kind of fuzzy idea. Okay, let's unpack this. Let's use a familiar scenario. Imagine you need a car. You've basically got two main options, yeah. You could buy one. That's a huge upfront cost. And then you're on the hook for everything. Fuel, maintenance, parking, insurance. It all adds up. That's a lot like how companies used to handle their IT, right? Owning servers, managing data centers, all that hardware and software stuff. But then there's the other way. You could just rent a car. You pay for what you use. You don't sweat the oil changes or major repairs. And, you can switch cars. Big SUV for a trip, small one for the city, whatever fits. Cloud computing is essentially that exact idea. But for computing power, for storage, software, you're renting these things over the internet, paying only for what you actually use.
Yeah, and that car analogy is really powerful actually, because getting your head around these different cloud models is absolutely crucial. It doesn't matter if you're making big tech decisions for your company or you're just, curious about the infrastructure behind everything we do online. Each model, and we'll get into this, it has really different cost structures, different risks, different things to think about when you're actually buying it. It really changes how you get, manage, and scale your digital stuff.
Right. And that's exactly our mission for this deep dive. We want to demystify the three main ways you kind of rent in the cloud: IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS. By the end, you won't just know what they are, but more importantly, why they matter for your decisions, how they impact your world.
So let's jump right in then. We'll explore IaaS, PaaS, SaaS, these different ways to rent IT. Each one's got a different balance, control versus responsibility, like our car analogy, different levels of commitment. Okay, first up, infrastructure as a service. IaaS. Think of this one as renting just the bare bones, the car chassis and the engine. You get the basics: virtual computers, storage space, network bits, but, well, your team still has to put in the seats, the steering wheel, even paint it. You build on top.
That's a good way to put it.
IaaS gives you those virtualized computing resources over the internet. So virtual machines, storage, networking components. You're basically getting the raw power, the fundamental infrastructure bits, which means you have a really high degree of control over operating systems, apps, middleware, all that stuff.
And the big names here, we're talking Amazon EC2, Microsoft Azure, virtual machines, Google Compute Engine, right?
Exactly. And what's really fascinating is seeing how companies like, say, Netflix use IaaS, they use AWS, Amazon Web Services, to rent just massive amounts of compute power and storage. It lets them store and stream movies globally, millions of people. And they don't own any server buildings themselves. Then when a hit show drops, viewership spikes, right? They can just, boom, quickly scale up, rent more chassis and engines, more compute to handle the rush. But here's something interesting, a bit of an insight people sometimes miss: the lift and shift fallacy. You can't always just take an old application from your own servers and drop it onto IaaS expecting magic. Sometimes if you don't re-architect it, it can actually end up costing more and performing worse in the cloud. You got to optimize it, not just move it.
Ah, okay. So if you're procuring IaaS, does that mean your own team, your internal folks, they're still doing a lot of the setup and the day-to-day management, even though you're renting?
Precisely, yes. This model gives you the most flexibility, the most control, absolutely. But that directly translates to needing the most management from your side. The overhead is higher. Pricing is usually based on, what you actually use: compute time, how much storage, how much data goes over the network. And you're also responsible for key things like operating system licenses, managing those systems. It's really vital to understand the different instance types, the sizing you need, and you can optimize costs, sometimes quite a bit, by looking at things like reserved instances. Basically, you commit to capacity upfront for a discount. Good for predictable usage.
Right. And the key cost then, it boils down to the compute instances: CPU, memory, performance, then storage, like the type capacity, IOPS. IOPS, that's input-output operations per second, how fast the storage is.
Exactly. How quickly it reads and writes data. Then network bandwidth, data transfer. Those are big ones. Plus any extras you add on: load balancers, firewalls, backup services, things like that.
Okay. So thinking about making those decisions, when is IaaS the right call for you?
You lean towards IaaS when you really need maximum control over the environment, deep control, especially if you have custom applications, things with very specific requirements. It's also pretty good for migrating existing apps with maybe minimal changes initially, or for setting up flexible dev and test environments where you want to closely mirror production.
Okay, makes sense. Moving up the stack then. Platform as a service, PaaS. This one feels more like renting a car that's mostly built, like no paint job yet, but the seats are in, the basic controls work. You get a ready-to-use platform for your apps, and you don't have to worry so much about the engines, the OS, the raw infrastructure underneath.
Yeah, that's a great way to think about it. PaaS provides a whole platform and environment really designed for developers so they can build, deploy, manage applications, but without messing with the underlying infrastructure. The servers, the operating systems, databases. The provider handles all that heavy lifting.
And examples here: Google App Engine, Azure App Service, Heroku, Salesforce Platform even.
Those are perfect examples. Think about maybe a mobile app company building something new. Instead of buying servers, setting up databases, installing all the programming tools, which takes time, right? They can just rent a PaaS test environment. Their developers just focus purely on building the app, coding, features, not infrastructure setup or management. It's a huge boost for efficiency. But here's a potential snag with PaaS. Sometimes these platforms are quite, let's say, opinionated. They have specific ways they want you to build things. What if your amazing new feature needs some back-end thing the platform doesn't easily support? You could suddenly find yourself wrestling with custom code, kind of defeating the purpose.
Right. So from a procurement angle, it sounds like you're getting more than just a tool. It's a whole environment designed to make developers faster. Is that the main idea?
Absolutely. It's a higher level of abstraction. It cuts down the management overhead for your team significantly. Pricing for PaaS, it's often based more on application usage, like runtime hours, maybe transactions. You do trade off some flexibility compared to IaaS, yes, but you typically get a much faster time to market for new applications. A really crucial thing to watch out for, though, is vendor lock-in, because you might rely on platform-specific features, so you really need to look closely at the development tools, the integration options, before you commit.
Okay. And the costs for PaaS usually cover things like application runtime or requests, database use, storage, plus any extra platform services like authentication, messaging, maybe dev tools and support too.
That's generally the shape of it, yes. Those are the main cost drivers.
So when does PaaS really shine? When does it make the most sense for a company?
PaaS is fantastic when you need rapid application development and deployment. That's a big one. Or when your main goal is just letting developers develop, not manage infrastructure. It's also good for fairly standard application architectures and where you have reasonably predictable usage patterns.
Got it. Okay, finally, the last layer. Software as a service. SaaS. This one's like renting the fully finished car, right? Built, painted, keys in hand, ready to drive. You just use the software. You don't manage anything behind the scenes. The provider handles absolutely everything. Updates, security, maintenance, the works.
Exactly. SaaS is all about delivering software applications over the internet, usually on a subscription. It completely gets rid of any need for local installation or maintenance by you, the user. It's purely about consuming that service.
And these examples are probably the ones everyone knows best. Yeah, Salesforce, Microsoft 365, Google Workspace, Dropbox, all SaaS.
Absolutely. Think about Microsoft 365 Word, Excel, Outlook Online. Or Salesforce for managing customer relationships. You don't install them on your machine, not really. You just log in through your web browser. The company providing it handles all the tech stuff in the background. It's genuinely ready to use. But, an interesting side effect we're seeing now is just the sheer number of SaaS tools companies use. It's not uncommon to find dozens, even hundreds. It leads to this subscription fatigue and even a new kind of shadow IT where different departments sign up for tools without central IT knowing. Can get messy.
That's a really good point, that subscription fatigue. So when you're procuring SaaS, you're buying a finished solution. Your main concerns are just like, what does the software do? Is it easy for people to use? And what's the cost per user per month? Pretty straightforward.
Yeah, that's basically it. SaaS is definitely the simplest model from a user perspective. Offers the most predictable costs, usually those fixed subscriptions. The flip side is you generally have limited customization options. Yeah. It is what it is. So managing the relationship with the vendor becomes really important. You absolutely need to think about data portability. Can you get your data out easily if you decide to leave? What's your exit strategy? Plus, how well does it integrate with the other systems you already use? That's key.
Okay. And key cost factors for SaaS. Usually per user fees, maybe different tiers with more features, storage limits, transaction caps sometimes, and maybe implementation help, training, integration costs, those things too.
Yep, those all factor in. Per user fees are the big one, but feature tiers, limits, and those initial setup or integration costs are definitely part of the picture.
And for the business user, or really any user,
right?
When is SaaS the clear winner?
SaaS is often the default choice for standard business applications, things like email, CRM, HR software. especially when you need to deploy something quickly or you have limited IT folks to manage applications internally. It's also great when you have a pretty predictable number of users and how they'll use it.
Yeah.
Makes budgeting and scaling much easier.
Okay. So we've walked through ISS, PaaS, and SaaS. We see the different levels of control, responsibility. Now, the million-dollar question, right? What does this all mean for your next decision? How do you actually choose the right model?
Right, and that's really the core of making smart cloud decisions today. What's fascinating, I think, is that there really isn't one single best answer. It truly depends on your specific situation, your needs, your priorities. When you're making that choice, you really need to compare the models across a few key areas. First, think about control. How much do you need? Really deep control down to the OS. That screams IaaS. Okay, with modern control, focusing on the application itself, that sounds like PaaS. Or do you just need a finished product? That's SaaS. Then, technical expertise. Do you have the skilled people in-house ready to manage infrastructure? That points to VS. Is your team focused on development and you want them not worrying about infrastructure? That's a VS. Or are your users mostly business folks who just need software that works? SaaS.
Control, expertise, what else?
Customization needs. Need to heavily customize everything. IaaS gives you that freedom. Needs some configuration, but not a total rebuild. PaaS might fit. Standard features are mostly okay. SaaS is probably fine. Then there's time to market. Need it deployed, like yesterday. SaaS is usually fastest. Need fast development cycles, but maybe not instant deployment. PaaS is good. Got a more flexible timeline, maybe doing a complex migration. IaaS timeframes can vary more.
Okay, and cost, that's always huge.
Right. Cost predictability. SaaS, with its subscriptions, is generally the most predictable. You know what you're paying per user per month. PaaS is often moderately predictable, maybe based on usage tiers. IaaS, because it's so directly tied to actual resource consumption, can be the least predictable if you don't manage it carefully. Usage can spike unexpectedly. It all boils down to aligning the cloud model with how you actually operate, what your team can handle, and what you're strategically trying to achieve.
And that wraps up our deep dive into the cloud's core services. We went from just the cloud as renting to really digging into IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS, seeing how each offers different levels of control, responsibility, and flexibility for whatever you need to do with technology.
Yeah, and it raises, I think, a really important question for everyone listening to think about. As technology just keeps changing, keeps evolving so fast, how will understanding these fundamental cloud models, IaaS, PaaS, SaaS, how will that let you not just react, but actually strategically use new innovations, use them to hit your specific goals, maybe even transform how you operate? Something to chew on.
Definitely something to think about. We really hope this deep dive gave you a much clearer picture of the cloud and its incredible potential. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.